So it's Donald Kendal again and Justin Haskins with Stopping Socialism TV, and we are back with more ways that you can help fight against the Great Reset. But before we get into that, as always, I have to make that plea to you to help get this message out there by just liking this video, subscribing to this channel, sharing the video, just doing all the little things. Don't cost you any money, but help us break through that algorithm that YouTube, Google, Facebook have constructed to keep this message from getting out there to more people. You can help break that, so just do those things, really help us out. But so Justin, we did a solutions video on the Great Reset. We had a number of ways that you can kind of communicate these messages to your friends and family, get this message out there, things that you can do just at a very individual level to help fight back against this global scourge of the Great Reset. But I cut that video down a little bit too much, and you had a handful of other solutions. So we're going to do part two to the solutions to the Great Reset. So what are these great solutions that you have in mind that I edited out of the first video?
Yeah, you really cut me off at the knees. you held me down. Held me down.
You know what? Let me come clean. I was paid off by the Great Reset, but that check only bought me off for a week. So hey, we're back.
Klaus Schwab sent you a check for $15.75. That's all it took, and then it bounced. So you're back. You're back in. You're back on the anti-Great Reset chain. Didn't take much to buy you off. Didn't take much to turn your back on Klaus. So here we are. We're back. That, by the way, don't sue us, Klaus. That was a joke. I know in Europe you guys don't know what that is, but it was a joke, and please don't take that seriously. Okay, so there are several things that we talked about last time. We don't need to go over all those things again, but I do want to remind you of one thing, and one of the big things that really can't happen now is the regulations. Right now, the Joe Biden administration is doing everything it can to encourage the Great Reset through reforms with the SEC, by killing regulations that the Trump administration had put into place at a regulatory agency called the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. The OCC put regulations into place at the end of the Trump administration that would have made it impossible for banks to discriminate against businesses based on the kind of business that they are. So, for example, a bank couldn't deny a loan to a company purely because it doesn't have enough electric vehicles in its fleet. But the Biden administration came in, killed that regulation before it ever actually went into the Federal Register. And so now banks are going to be able to do that. They've openly said they're going to do that, and that's one of the main ways we're going to get this Great Reset. It's not just about electric cars, it's about all sorts of things. Banks could theoretically say, we're not going to do business with anybody. We're not even going to give you a checking account if you don't have enough, a high enough ratio of Hispanics to Asians in your company. We're not going to give you a bank account. We're not going to give you loans. They could do that based on what we've seen so far. At least that's our understanding of the way this Great Reset is shaping up and the way that the regulations are forming at the federal level. So theoretically, if you had regulations in place that said banks and financial institutions cannot discriminate against companies based on the kind of business they are, so long as they're a legal business, they have to base lending decisions on financial information, not based on the kind of business they are. If they had those regulations, if we made those regulatory changes, then it would be very difficult for much of the Great Reset to go into effect. Now,
and that was in place. That was in place by the Trump administration, and then the Biden administration quickly got rid of them.
They passed the regulations. They didn't actually go into effect yet. They were about to go into effect. Biden comes into office and kills them before they go into effect.
If that's not the biggest proof that the Biden administration is so on board with the Great Reset, I don't know what is.
It happened within, I want to say it was like within the first week or two. So it was like right at the very beginning. It was like one of the first things that he did was come in and kill those regulations. In fact, if I remember right, I don't even think they had a new head of the OCC to do it. In other words, Biden didn't even have his own person in at the OCC when they started putting up, I think they paused it first, but they essentially killed this thing right at the very start. It's obvious what they're trying to do here for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Biden comes into the White House, he like changes the bed sheets first. And then this is like the second thing he did.
Yeah.
That's essentially what happened.
And what's amazing about it is it's such a non-sexy, like there's no political, you don't get any political wins out of this. This is purely I really want to do this thing, like this is inside baseball stuff. So you must really want it. This is not about winning votes, in your
headlined,
first week.
Headline moves in the first 5 days or something like that.
Most people didn't even know that it happened. So anyway, regulations is a big part of it. But with Joe Biden in office, we know that he supports the Great Reset, not only because he's buddies with Klaus Schwab, or at least he's professional buddies with Klaus Schwab. He's got all sorts of people connected to him who are Great Reset people, World Economic Forum people.
I heard they play shuffleboard on weekends. That's just a rumor.
Well, they did. They did until Joe Biden, blew out his hip and couldn't take it anymore. It's a little too active for Joe. But you totally just derailed me completely. But in addition to Joe Biden having all these connections, of course, John Kerry, the climate change czar or the special envoy for climate or whatever his title is, open Great Reset supporter, has met with the World Economic Forum, participated in events for the Great Reset, said that he supports the Great Reset, and has said that Joe Biden supports the Great Reset, and that he believes the Great Reset's going to happen faster than most people think and with greater intensity. So we know that Joe Biden supports it, and we know John Kerry supports it, and we know other people in the Biden administration support it. So they're not going to do any of these regulatory changes, but they are important to talk about because in the long run, we probably need some of these regulatory changes in order to stop some aspects of the Great Reset. All right, so that's the first thing. Second thing is something that I think we can all individually participate in, and that is banks and in corporations too. Where are you doing your banking? Who are you doing business with? Are you doing business with banks and financial institutions that are discriminating against companies and individuals that don't have ESG scores, that don't embrace the Paris Climate Agreement, that don't, agree with left-wing causes? I mean, are you doing businesses with companies that are imposing these ideas on people through this ESG system? There are lots of banks and lots of corporations, big, major, massive corporations that are on board with this. Are you doing business with them? Are you giving your money to banks and helping them financially that are participating in this whole thing, that are trying to impose it on other people? If you bank with one of the 6 largest banks in the United States of America, you are doing that. You may not even realize it, and you're supporting this indirectly. So I am not a financial advisor. I'm not giving you financial advice. I'm not telling you who you should bank with. And, I'm not telling you should even boycott people. But if you're a customer of, Wells Fargo or Chase Bank or Morgan Stanley or Bank of America or any of the major banks in the United States, have you reached out to them and told them as a customer, I don't want you involved in this? You have every right to do that. Even if you don't want to pull your money out, you could at least threaten to do it. It's going to make them nervous. And so at the very least, reach out to these people and tell them that you don't support this. Tell them that you don't want them involved in politics. Many of these big corporations that you're probably buying products from have come out and done hyper partisan political things lately. This is all tied in with the Great Reset. They're getting super political in part because they know that's how this whole Great Reset thing's going to end up. They're going to have to become political in order to play ball, in order to get the money they need to continue functioning, in order to expand, in order to be in good with the ruling class. Look at what happened in Georgia recently. Georgia passed an election law to make common sense changes to their system so that there would not be voter fraud, or there would be less voter fraud, or less ability to have voter fraud in their state. These were really basic common sense things, like having to have an ID when you vote remotely, through the mail or something, because if you don't have some way of proving who you are, you could be anybody. You could be someone committing voter fraud. So just asking people to have a free ID that the government is going to provide you at no cost if you don't have any money, that kind of thing is now being opposed by major corporations that have nothing to do with voting. Right. Companies, just one of them, just your basic companies. I think Coca-Cola at the time when it first came out was opposed to it. I think Microsoft was speaking out against it. Some of them alluded to it, didn't come out directly and said, we don't like this law, but they were obviously opposed to it. Delta Airlines.
The MLB pulled their All-Star game from there.
Major League Baseball pulled their All-Star game from Atlanta because they said that these basic common sense voting laws, things that exist in most of Europe already, that exist throughout the United States up until COVID, widespread common sense stuff. They came out and said, we're not going to have our All-Star game here because we don't like these voting laws. So they moved it to a whole nother state that already had some of those voting laws in place in Colorado. So why are they getting so political? Because it's all part of this Great Reset thing. They're trying to get on the good side of the people who have the money and who have the power. So you don't have to do business with these people. You sure as heck, if you want to do business with them, despite this, you can complain and you could tell them you don't want this and put some pressure on them. It may not necessarily make the difference, but it's a good step in the right direction. And it's the least I think that we can do to try to put pressure on these companies to stay away from this Great Reset thing, to stay away from ESG scores, to stay away from all woke causes, and just stick to the businesses that they started. Well, if you're Coca-Cola, stick to creating Coca-Cola products. Don't get involved in voter fraud issues and, social justice and all this other stuff. Stick to your products and goods and services if you want to do business with me as the consumer. Send that message to them and they will respond to it. They will care about that.
Yeah, similar to in the first point where we were talking about how the Biden administration did this despite the fact that it wouldn't get the sexy headlines and that they're being all woke or anything like that. They're not doing this to pander to anybody. It kind of flew under the radar. That's actually like one of the big benefits to the people pursuing the Great Reset is that the average person doesn't know what it is. They don't even know that it's a bad thing that they should be opposed to. So what we're trying to do is expose it, put so much more exposure on this so that people actually know what it is, know that it's bad, and want to fight back against it. So that going to and pressuring, a bank or something like that, saying, yeah, we know what you're doing and we don't like it. That is showing that they are, they're out of the shadows. We know what they're doing, and it puts the pressure on them. It really does. It doesn't seem like it's a lot, but it's showing that, the thing that you're kind of keeping hidden and doing behind closed doors, we know what it is. So it's very important.
Right. So the next thing on the list is related to something called modern monetary theory. Now, modern monetary theory is this. Actually, you're the one who's doing all this research for Glenn Beck on modern monetary theory. You want to talk about some modern monetary theory?
Modern monetary theory is a concept that I guess the face of it would be Stephanie Kelton, not the most well-known of names, but it's certain aspects of it have been echoed by people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some other pretty high-profile people. But it's basically this idea that debt and deficits don't matter. That the United States, because we have a monopoly on creating the US dollar, we can print as many of them as we want, that we run no risk of actually defaulting on loans or anything like that. We could always print more money. So it's this idea that debt and deficits don't matter and that we can print as much money as we want. Of course, we in this field know that that is lunacy. That is inevitably going to lead to inflation and probably terrible amounts of inflation. That puts at risk our world reserve currency status of the US dollar globally, which has some crazy, crazy potential negative impacts. But the reason why we bring this up is because this is a cornerstone of the Great Reset agenda, the plot of this. It wouldn't work without this idea of modern monetary theory, this idea of unlimited money printing. And we have seen unlimited money printing Well, I mean, probably for a while. They've kind of pretended like it mattered, for a while, even especially since like 2008, all the quantitative easing, et cetera, et cetera. But it has really just stepped on the gas during the COVID years. It's just sad that I had to say COVID years, plural. But yeah, just basically unlimited. There is no break on this, the money printing machines here, and that has large consequences for the Great Reset. And I think you can probably explain that aspect a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing to keep in mind here is that these big corporations that are buying into the Great Reset, these banks, all these financial institutions, investors, etc., they're buying into it in part because it's there's an element here of there's a savior complex that exists among many people in the ruling class. They want to have more control over society. There's no doubt about any of that. But there's also a lot of money in it for them. And the way that they think they're going to get this money is through all this money printing that you were just alluding to, right? And so if they play ball, if they go along with what the ruling class wants, they think that the central banks and governments are going to start funneling money in their direction. So that's a big, big, big part of this Great Reset. If you look at groups like Principles for Responsible Investment, which has been around now for a long time, their sole purpose is to run around and try to get investors to buy into this whole concept of sustainable investment and ESG scores and all of this. The people who have signed on to the Principles for Responsible Investment control together collectively more than 100 trillion with a T dollars, $100 trillion. Okay. That's how powerful this movement is. And when you read the presentations that they've put together, the Principles for Responsible Investment, anybody can go to their website and find, if you dig around enough, you'll find them. The presentations say that they believe that you're going to make money on this, that you're going to get money from this, because the government is going to funnel trillions and not just the American government, governments all over the world are going to funnel trillions and trillions of dollars into various causes related to ESG scores and sustainable investment and climate change especially, and all these things. And so if the government couldn't print an infinite amount of money, then it would be much, much, much harder to funnel an seemingly endless amount of money into these companies, because you would have to get it from somewhere else. You couldn't just print it. That means you got to take it from somebody and to give it to someone else, right? And in the past, when that's happened, you obviously create a whole class or group of very unhappy people or businesses when you're doing this, right? Because if you got to take money from some people to give it to other people, you're by definition making some people unhappy. And so by printing the money, you're not making anybody unhappy. They should be unhappy because they should know that there are all sorts of problems related to that, including inflation and you're destabilizing the economy and you're creating economic bubbles and all sorts of other things. But short term, there's no one who's really upset by this. And that's what we're seeing. We've seen this in the COVID years. We're printing trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that we don't have just in America. They're doing it in Europe. They're doing it all over the world. This money is being invented out of thin air. And it's being used to coerce these businesses to sign on to this. So if we can stop that, then we can put the brakes on the Great Reset, because it's going to be very hard to do the Great Reset in a system where you actually have to tax people to get money to give it to other people.
Yeah, and one thing just to kind of drive that home, we have quotes, and you can find these on stoppingsocialism.com, where they talk about all of the different stimulus packages that are being passed in countries all around the world, that it would be better to use that money to build up a new system instead of filling the cracks of the old system. So to us, that kind of insinuates that they're going to make sure that this money is going to certain areas that they want to build up, instead of just kind of blanketed across everyone that's affected by this. Right. So yeah, that's clearly the goal here. You could just look at their own quotes.
Right. So how do we stop that? I mean, how do we prevent this from happening? Obviously, Congress in America is not going to do it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they don't care.
Obviously, we can't teach them economics 101 and the consequences of printing unlimited amounts of money. That doesn't seem to resonate with our politicians.
It really doesn't. And you know, this is not a Democrat only thing, a Democrat only problem or a liberal only problem. Republicans have been just as bad at doing this. They really have. I mean, I know a lot of people watching this video, big fans of Donald Trump, I'm sure, but Donald Trump spent as much money or more money than basically any other president given the time period he was in office. In the history of America, he probably spent more money than any president in his first 4 years in office. So, I mean, Republican Congresses, they haven't balanced the budget. They haven't done any of that stuff. So they're recklessly spending money too. So how do we get them to control their spending when they're not willing to do it? Well, I think the only way is through a balanced budget amendment. Or it doesn't even have to be a balanced budget amendment. It just has to be an amendment that significantly slows the growth of government spending. So if you just tied it to growth in GDP or you tied it to something, I actually like a hard cap that slowly expands over time with maybe some special carve-outs for war or something like that. But I think that having some kind of a balanced budget amendment, an amendment in the Constitution that requires the government to be more fiscally responsible, whatever the specifics look like, don't really matter to me at this point. I just want us to get to the point where we're actually having that conversation. That would really put a stop to the Great Reset. I don't think the Great Reset could happen if you cut off the endless stream of money flowing into the coffers of these people making the decisions. The problem with a balanced budget amendment, of course, is you would have to get that through Congress. There is a way around it in the United States, and it's called an Article 5 convention. And an Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States allows for states to create amendments without Congress actually having to pass those amendments. And it's if you're interested in Article 5 Convention of States, you can look this stuff up. You can Google it. There's all sorts of incredible resources out there from people who are constitutional attorneys and people who have studied this issue for many, many years. The Heartland Institute has been throughout its history involved in this movement very closely. And so there are a lot of great resources out there about Article 5 conventions and how they work and you know, whether or not you need to be worried about runaway conventions and all that kind of stuff. We don't need to get into that. But the important thing to keep in mind is that there is a way for states to pass an amendment without Congress. And you'd be shocked to learn that there are a massive number of states. I don't have the number in front of me right now, but there are a massive number of states that have actually already done this, that have already called for an Article 5 convention in order to pass a balanced budget amendment. Some constitutional attorneys believe we're only like 1 or 2 states away, depending on how you count the states, necessary in order to meet that threshold for the minimum number of states required to call a constitutional convention or a convention for an amendment convention. So we're not that far away. We're a handful of states away probably from actually making this a reality. And it is possible for us to do this at the local level just through the state legislatures. I don't even think you need governors to agree to it in order to do it. I think state legislatures on their own can call for this. So if we could get enough states to sign up for this, and there are lots of conservative red states that have not done this, believe it or not. If we could get enough states to sign up for this and call for an amendments convention to create a constitutional amendment that mandates this, we could put a stop to the Great Reset and bring fiscal sanity back to the United States in the process. So this is a huge, huge, important thing that we need to be focusing on. And frankly, although lots of people on the right have talked about this over the years, it just has never become like a keystone issue for the right. And it needs to be, because it's tied into so many other government programs, expansions of power, etc. You know, we've talked about the Green New Deal many times in the past. Conservatives are all upset and angry and worried about the Green New Deal. You know how you could kill the Green New Deal overnight? Have a balanced budget amendment. There'd be no way to pay for any of it. So we need to make this a priority. And this may be the most important way to stop it in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I was just looking it up. Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force. I'm not sure if I'm looking at the most updated thing, but it's suggesting that 28 states have passed a resolution. There's 10 more that are targeted, and that basically only need 6 more. But I know that there are
sounds about right.
Certain ways to interpret it that, certain states that have passed ones that seem to be all encompassing, they could be worked in. So yeah, we're actually a lot closer to this than you would think. So it's an important one for sure. Yep. Any other solutions, Justin? Are we going to wrap this up?
The very last thing is that we need to have, from a policy perspective, we need to have a greater focus on making sure that decision making is happening here in the United States when it comes to policies that affect the United States. I mean, the Great Reset, the whole point of the Great Reset is not to put America first above other nations. The whole point of the Great Reset is to internationalize decision-making and to standardize across the entire world ideas and policies for our businesses and for our economies that we here in America may not want. And, we've done a video very recently about the European Union, how the European Union is involved in all of this and how they're trying to impose the Great Reset, not just on companies in the European Union, but on any company that does business with any big business in the European Union. So this is an international movement, and I'm all for various kinds of international agreements that relate to, helping impoverished people and providing medical assistance to people who are down and out in, Africa and places like that. But that's not what this is about. This is about controlling the entire global economy, centralizing what businesses should be prioritizing, what they shouldn't be prioritizing, from places like Europe, from Davos, from places like that. We need to have more of an America-focused agenda when it comes to policy making, because Americans know what's best for them, and Swedes know what's best for Sweden, and Spain knows what's best for Spain. I mean, we should be making decisions at the local level, not at I don't even want to make it at a national level. I want it at a state level or a local level. Never mind an international level. Now we're just getting to pure insanity. So I think a return to that mindset of not that we have to be selfish and only think about America and no one else, but that we have to understand that, no taxation without representation, right? I want decisions made here. I pay taxes to my government for them to make decisions on my behalf. I don't pay taxes to, Coca-Cola and the other, elites at Bank of America and places like that, for them to fly off to Davos with European central bankers and international institutions to make decisions about what businesses in America should be selling. There's no way for me to hold those people accountable. And so we need to change our entire mindset and refocus and make sure that people are making decisions locally as best as they possibly can, and certainly not on an international level.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right. Well, that's enough for you to chew on there, audience here. These are ways that you can help fight back against this Great Reset. Like I've said in numerous videos, this to us is the most important thing going on. I think bar none, honestly. So, yeah. And I think we're the people that are covering it the closest. So if you want to stay up to date on everything the Great Reset, you have to go to stoppingsocialism.com. You have to just subscribe to Stopping Socialism TV on YouTube here. And check back all the time, because we're going to have updates again more than anyone else. So tune in to stoppingsocialism.com. You can find us on all social media, Stopping Socialism on Facebook. You can find our Parler account, Instagram, even. Justin, where can people find you?
At Justin T. Askins on Facebook and Socialist Twitter and Parler and just about everywhere else.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next time.